All right, it says we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with LA. And I'm here today with Mark Lipman, and he and I are going to talk about housing and homelessness. We can't talk about one without the other. What I will say going into this conversation is two things. One, we do not have a housing crisis. We have a low income housing crisis. And number two, trickle down housing does not work. It will not work. It never will work. Reaganomics, no. It does not work. So we have to have bigger, bolder, and better solutions. So with that a little bit, Mark, could you do me a huge favor and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you do it, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Rachel, first, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you here today. And just from the introduction that you just gave about housing, I can tell that you and I are going to get along just fine. Now, currently, I serve in Culver City as the vice chair of our Committee on Homelessness. So I've been working directly on the city level in Culver City on this issue for the last 3 years. But also regionally, I've been working on the issue for the last 15 years from Santa Monica, Venice, Mar Vista, Culver City, the entire West Side, and into the greater Los Angeles area. Also, I'm a poet, a publisher, an artist. This is kind of like the double track of my life, but anything that I do with art is usually or very often, if not always, around the themes of social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. So this is really the focus of my life work. And then with the housing justice work I do, it's really an extension of that intention into the everyday work of my life, giving back to the community that I belong to. So that's the direction I'm coming into the conversation from, is one of looking for the solutions to the issues that we're facing, which from the ground up, from the bottom up, we realize that it's not what's been handed to us year after year and 5-year plan after 10-year plan with no results at the end. So I'm glad to be able to engage in a conversation where we can start looking at things of how to do things right. So thank you again for inviting me today.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing. Yeah, I think we also can jive on the art level as well. Before I moved out here 20 years ago, I did architecture for almost 20 years, as well as I came out here to work on movie sets. And so, production designer, art department, so, maybe not the social justice and that kind of slant to it. But yeah, no, I was looking at the artwork behind you.
Yeah,
all
original.
I was going to say, can I assume that's your work?
Yeah, the walls are covered. I've been painting and writing for decades now, so
Right on.
Thank you for noticing.
Do you play a musical instrument?
Yes, I also play guitar, and I'm getting better. So there you go.
Yeah, I play a little piano. I also sing. Been singing since I was 5. So yeah.
I've written about 100 original songs in my life, so
yeah,
that just adds to the collection.
Right on. So getting down to brass tacks, you said, I have to agree that what we've been handed to us, because surely, us as stakeholders, as constituents, I don't know that we get listened to as often as we should. Um, and and developers do seem to have, their hands in pockets. So
They've got the inside track to all the planning departments, so they know how to fast track their projects before the public is even aware anything is going on.
yeah, and that's I was I just came off my board, my neighborhood council board. Was president for 2 years, been on the board for 4 years. Decided not to run again because I'm running for LA City Council, and so the last 4 years I've been the chair of our planning and land use committee.
Okay.
And that gave me entree into all the rooms and
And which neighborhood council?
Rampart Village.
Okay.
Neighborhood council. And so so I've been in all the meetings and heard it all, and I actually, you get a kick out of this. I actually got Matt Glesney about 3 months ago, and I think it was Alliance of River Communities. It's a neighborhood council alliance for the LA River, and I actually got him to admit that the Department of LA City Planning actually does go by the belief that trickle down housing will provide a sufficient enough low income housing units that we
Yeah,
need.
and that's just the lie that's been given to us, for decades now, and it just doesn't work. When what they're doing is tearing down over the last, what I've seen the last 15, 20 years, is tearing down as much truly low income housing as they can find to replace it with market rate. And then if you're lucky, you get one unit that they've so graciously not sent off to somewhere else as an in lieu fee. If we're even able to get that one unit, we're still at a negative, and this has been happening for decades. So throughout the whole community here, we've been losing housing left and right. And what they're replacing it with is, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month studios that no one can afford. And simultaneously, what they're doing is all these big tech corporations are really working to take over the entire West Side. They've basically kind of redlined the entire coastal region of LA, so West LA down kind of like to Playa del Rey before the airport. That whole area there is one big rich-only zone. And they're trying to evict as many low-income people from that area as possible and shift people to Downey and Whittier and South Central and Compton and Lancaster and wherever they can get people to. And what they're doing first is they're making the cost of living so high that we're losing 130,000 people every year. We're actually losing a congressional seat because lower income and middle low income people are fleeing the state just because they can't afford to live here anymore. And simultaneously, the people that are trying to hang on, a lot of people are becoming homeless, have been forced out of their stable housing onto the streets, who don't want to leave their existing communities because it's the only thing they know. These are the people that they're trying to shift out to all these other areas where they've never even heard of human rights. The further east you go, the tougher the cops get. And it's kind of by design, because once they've shifted you so far out of any place that you have any connection to at all of a sudden you're just on your own. And that's how the system wants you to be. They don't want people coming together as a community, because when you have a community, then you have a group of people that you work with to help support each other. And that's the last thing that a status quo government wants, is people actually working together for their own common benefit. So
That's
what they're
why.
doing is they're breaking down communities.
Yeah, no, and I that's absolutely correct. I mean, that's why 400 cops were called out to clear Echo Park,
Yeah.
is because they actually were starting to thrive. They were starting to actually build infrastructure at the park. An actual, I saw that they had dug holes and put posts for a shower, you know. Um, and so and the community was actually coming together and actually, they had I
And
think,
all the
yeah,
press about the crime and all this stuff, finding a needle. Like, we found a needle. Oh my God, there's a huge thing going on there. They take the smallest things they can find and blow it up so that the public perception is that there's a huge crime spree and drug addicts everywhere, when from what I'm understanding from the people who were actually on the ground there, it was a very well managed, respectful people respecting each other's space and building that community that we're talking about. And it was getting too solid. People were actually feeling roots again.
yeah,
And that's when they break you up. They don't want anyone to feel any stability under them. So this is, it's systemic. It's what's going on. And people are saying, they can't stay there. And people are intensely, where do you want us to go? And they just want you to disappear. And in every community, whether it's Echo Park or Venice or Culver City or wherever you are, the narrative at that neighborhood council level, at that hyper local level, is it's only happening here. And oh my God, they're trying to funnel everyone here to our community. And if we can just get rid of them from our community, the problem will be solved because we won't have to see it anymore.
right.
And a lot of these same people are the ones who have, for decades, have pushed back and resisted any type of housing for people who are homeless or any services for people who are homeless. They've done everything in their political power to make life as difficult as possible for anyone who is on the street, to make it near impossible for anyone to get rehoused. And then they point and say, look at all these terrible people who are so poor, they don't deserve anything except a prison cell. And they don't even put two and two together, where it costs us 2.5 times as much money to put someone in a prison or a jail cell as it does to house them. It currently costs us $75,000 every year for every prisoner we have in the state or everyone we have in a jail here in the county. It costs us $60,000 with this continuum of care, this wraparound service only, but no housing that we love to do to just prolong the problem. It costs us $60,000 a year for status quo. It literally cost us $25,000 a year simply to pay the rent and get people off the street and into real housing, not shelters, not tiny homes, not safe camping or safe parking, but into real homes that exist today. And whenever you talk about vacancy rates, about how we have 4 times as many vacant housing units in every community across this country, where we have 1.2 million vacant housing units in California, 251,000 vacant housing units in the county of Los Angeles, 93 vacant housing units in LA City. Here in Culver City, we have on average 1,000 vacant units at any time. And all those numbers are about 4 times how many homeless people you have in those comparative regions. And this is what we're seeing. We have all this vacant housing and all these people who can't afford to live there. So the real solution, the only solution with a proven track record going back 20 years now, actually, let's say it started in 1993 when we first started hearing housing first. It took a decade for that to start to be implemented in some places. And when it was, all of a sudden, we start seeing the ending of homelessness in cities like Salt Lake City. Actually, the entire state of Utah is homeless free. Why? Because they went for a housing first approach. Bakersfield, just 2 weeks ago, announced there was a news article that they ended homelessness by doing a housing first approach. Now, what all of the bureaucrats love to do is they love to grab our phrasing. So they will tell you, oh, we're doing housing first, but they're not. Why? Because there's different steps, different levels of how to implement a housing first program. And what our government does, what our local regional government is doing right now, is they're basically on the 5th step. They start at step 5, which is project-based, like motel conversion, multi-million-dollar projects, tens of millions of dollars for a project that's going to take 5 to 10 years to materialize. That's the project-based housing for homeless first, but that is down the road. The first step, what they're supposed to be doing to properly implement a housing first program, is called scattered site housing. And what that is you go with whatever housing is currently available. So if you have an apartment for rent, the city comes in, the county comes in, they take out a master lease. They guarantee the rent, they guarantee security and damage deposits. They guarantee actually even incentives. You get signing bonuses, so you get actually more money. So you get like an extra month of rent free just for holding the unit, just for signing the contract. And then what the jurisdiction does is they sublet that to someone who needs the housing. So we are actually in control of that unit and can put someone in there, taking away the barriers and the obstacles. And this is how you can get people housed in every single community, in their existing communities, at a lower cost, at 2.5 times less than what it's currently costing us to keep people on the streets. And it's kind of no-brainer, but if we did that, if we actually paid for the house and just got people into what existing housing there is, and actually ended homelessness, which we can do today, we can end homelessness. If we wanted to, if we put the money in the budget, if we actually design the program properly, we could end homelessness very quickly. But what does that mean? If we end homelessness, then all of these, neoliberal politicians, all of these upzoning hawks, all of these developers and people like Jeff Bezos who want to just turn the entire West Side over into a mini Manhattan, where they want Culver City as their base, and they just want to upzone us to the sky and put in their corporate Thunderdome in here. And all these people can no longer point to homelessness as the reason to build more, because that's what they're doing today. They look at people on the street and say, we need to build more because there's so many homeless people out there. And nothing they ever build is for the people who actually need the housing. It's only more market rate for their millionaire buddies so that they can take over a region and not only keep people on the streets, but put more people on the streets, because all of those lower income people that have to make way, have to sell their homes. If you have a homeowner today who's making $50,000, $75,000 a year, no way in hell could they ever buy a house today in today's market. They only got in because they were able to get in 20, 30 years ago. And they were lucky. And a lot of the people there are saying, well, those are the people that should be leaving because they got in lucky and we need to get rid of them. Huh? You do not get rid of your existing community to make way for progress, which only means more economic and racial disparity. Here in Culver City, what they're doing is they're pointing to upzoning as the way to create more affordable housing and to turn over the racial covenants of the past. Because if you don't know, Culver City 100 years ago at its founding was a sundown town. And you had all these racial covenants where you could not own property if you were Black or brown. And if you were in town after sundown, you could be sure that the police were going to start hassling you. And it's very well known. It's very well documented. But disingenuously, the people who are supporting upzoning are saying, we need to upzone all those lower income homeowners out of our city so we can make way for racial justice. Excuse me? You're going to take a property that's currently worth $1.5 million, split it up into 4 properties, because now what they want to do is put up 4 townhomes. And if you've seen these townhomes that are going up in all sorts of places, they're basically these concrete buster bunkers here up to the sky that are basically 4 of these McMansions squeezed together that are each going for $1.8, $1.92 million a pop. So what they want to do is take a property that's worth maybe $1 or $2 million and convert it into a property that's worth $6 or $7 million. And they say that's going to bring us affordable housing. They say that's going to bring us racial equity, when we know that economics and racism is completely tied together, that the blacker you are, the browner you are, the lower your income is going to be systemically. So when we create more unaffordable housing, we're actually creating even greater racial barriers in our community, because the people that we claim to be working for will never be able to buy their way in. So what do we do about it? Now we get into some nice juicy stuff here, okay? I tell you.
Let's hear it, Mark. Let's hear it.
Okay.
What do we do about this?
Have you heard about what's happening in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with 100% affordable overlay zones?
Oh, yes. I read about that.
Okay, so
I like the idea.
Instead of upzoning,
aren't they also doing that in Oakland?
They're doing it in Berkeley right now. Maybe in Oakland too. I'm not sure.
I know it was somewhere up there.
But they're doing it up in Berkeley as well. Yeah. And there's a lot of enthusiasm about this here. But already, as you can be sure, they're starting to spin how it's supposed to be done. Because if you're looking to make money, if real estate is your game, if you're an investor, then you can't have 100% affordable overlay zone. Because what that means is, if we need to add density, if we need to add variances, if we need to add height or whatever that is going to be, then it has to be a 100% affordable project. So if you want to build 4 units on a site that has 1 home today, well, that has to be 4 truly affordable units, and no developer out there is going to do that unless it's a nonprofit developer who's building truly affordable housing. So what this does is, instead of upzoning, because upzoning and 100% affordable overlay zone are in direct competition, they cannot work together. And what they're trying to tell us is that they can. But what happens is that 100% affordable overlay zone is to put the brakes on these investment speculators. If you give any blanket upzoning at all, if you say we're going to do a 100% overlay, affordable overlay zone and upzone, then you've just handed the developer what they want, and it's going to cut the legs right out from the overlay zone, because it will have no teeth. Mm-hmm. So you have to do one or the other. As we know, developers, investment speculators, Wall Street money is not going to support affordable housing. We know that. And anyone trying to tell you differently is just gaslighting you. And even with all of these affordability covenants worked into all of the zoning and all of this, they still have loopholes where they can pay an in lieu fee and just not build the affordable housing. They're not going to do it. So, you know, when people try throwing that at me, I'm saying, please just don't insult my intelligence, you know, because that's what it really is, trying to make us think that we can't believe our eyes and ears and the facts on the ground. So you can't do upzoning with 100% affordable overlay. But what can you do? Well, if you can only do 100% affordable projects, then what you get is the door opening for community land trusts, which means that we can actually, through a public bank, like we were talking earlier, which is on its way coming in Los Angeles, Culver City could actually buy its way into the public bank of Los Angeles, get a seat on the board of directors, and get
potentially
in a couple of years when it's
well, what I'm saying potentially is that just so folks know, I'm actually working. I've been for the last couple of months working with the organizing group for the Public Bank of LA, and a lot of it's going to depend on what the city council votes on, and we're trying to get the city council to actually put out a request for proposal for a consultant to actually do the business plan. And so, and that's where we are in that process, just so everybody knows. But that debate on whether or not it'll just be LA City funds in the bank, or whether or not we would actually have other municipalities or even private depositors. That may actually be a lot further down the road than the
okay, because
I just wanted to make sure that kind of clear on that.
So just for clarification, there's just, you might not have known this, but we did get a presentation at our city council by, I guess, the group
Yes.
pushing for the public bank. And I believe we were told that we could get a buy-in at something like $3 million at the ground level to get in as a member of the board. So I don't know although where it is at this stage. We understand it's still a couple of years away.
Yeah.
But everything is still a couple of years away, but we're moving in the right direction. And as we discussed also about how it's moving forward in the state.
I think the public bank is probably one of the most exciting things that I've worked on in a long time.
Absolutely agree.
Because the promise behind it,
is self-funding.
Just 2 seconds on this, if I could. I know we're kind of going off of topic, but I'm just so excited about it because the city of Los Angeles pays $1 billion a year in fees to Bank of America and JP Morgan Stanley, and that money, that profit to those companies, that gets reinvested in things that I don't think we necessarily want to have our money reinvested in, such as oil, fossil fuel, the fossil fuel industry, guns, you name it. They've our money, a piece of our money is going into those organizations. And
this has been a long battle. This has been a decade in the making, because we first got the resolution at City Council 10 years ago out of Occupy Los Angeles. So when we were starting that whole economic debate about how we're structuring our economy post crash. Remember, they crashed our housing market in 2008. If people don't remember that. And what's happening today is just round two. But we actually pushed 10 years ago to get a public bank to divest from Wall Street. And we're starting to get there. We're almost there. So that's all on the horizon. And this opens up all the possibilities for us to self-fund our own projects. Now, according to, I think it's Title 34, Article 34, something like that in the state constitution, we can't build our own public housing, but we can set up community land trusts with other nonprofits. So we can have like a 49% stake in that share for building real community-owned projects so that we can build the mass scale and architecture that fits the existing community with the type of housing and the affordability levels that we actually need, and at the same time create our own rent-to-own programs so that low-income people and people of color can actually become homeowners in the communities that they've been traditionally excluded from. And what's happening on the kind of the neoliberal push is that they just want to upzone the whole single family districts. They want to upzone all the R1s. And basically what that means is cutting down the trees and building to the edge of the property line and building to the sky and devastating the beautiful neighborhoods that we have, because they want the rich people who have that to not have that anymore. And if anyone has talked with me for any length of time, they're going to understand that my perspective is not of taking anyone down. We don't aim to take someone down. Unless it's someone like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, everyone else, we're all just pawns in the game. And I'm not about taking anyone down, but of lifting those in need up. So when we say that we're going to start creating real affordable housing in these neighborhoods, we're going to create real affordable housing that people who haven't been in these neighborhoods can enjoy the lifestyle that is in these neighborhoods. Why would we destroy something that's really great that people love just to punish the people who have a little bit more? That's not how we build alliances. That's not how we do any bridge building. And it's not how we're going to get people to listen to us. Because if I'm standing up for that low-income homeowner, and I'm telling them, look, I'm standing up for you, but I'm also standing up for that guy on the street and the tenant as well, and anyone who is the oppressed in the situation. And if we look at it as that we all rise, that it's about all of us, then no one is left out. And this gets into a lot of the other conversations that we have as well, because we have to reimagine what our entire society is going to be. The pandemic has really opened a lot of people's eyes to get people to understand that it doesn't work for everyone. Normal isn't anything we want to go back to because it just doesn't work for so many people. So how are we going to rebuild a society that is truly just? Well, first, it's housing justice. It also has to be job justice and economic justice, where we actually get paid a thriving wage. Screw $15 an hour. That's like 10 years ago. We need $30 an hour here in LA to be able to afford a studio. I mean, really, let's get with it. So if we're not actually paying a real wage, and also, what is our entire wage-based system around? It's all about things that can destroy this planet. A forest has no value until you cut all the trees, until you cut down all the trees. And then all of a sudden it's worth something. But we've lost all our air and our shade and all the things that keep this planet healthy. So we have to reimagine that whole economic vision of what we're going to invest our entire economy in. So it's things that actually give people a purpose in life. Because one of the things that the younger generation is really struggling with today is they have no hope for the future. There's a lot of nihilism going on with our younger population because they see what's going on. They see that, we're destroying the planet, and those who are in charge are not the adults in the room, because they're not making sure that we have a planet that's healthy for future generations. And all we do is rely on police to deal with every social issue. And we just can't do that anymore. There's just so much to get into, because it's an onion. You just peel one layer, it gets even deeper. But let's look at our society. At the federal level, all we fund is the military. At the local level, all we fund is the police. For every police officer we hire, we could permanently house 10 people forever for the cost of one police officer. Now, this isn't to say all cops are bad and all that stuff. Racism is inherent with the policing system, point blank. They were founded on the slave and the Indian patrols. It's a racist system. Now, the police officers themselves still deserve a living wage, but maybe we just don't need so many cops doing all this stuff, because if we actually invested in housing, and if we invested in healthcare and we invested in all the other things in real jobs and maybe a universal basic income, then all that crime would disappear. And then we wouldn't need so many cops. And so the ones that we have would be more like community officers, because we get back to a community level where it's not just guys in uniform all over the place with a baton, but it's people who understand their local communities. And as we transition, everyone still gets jobs. Everyone's housing is still taken care of. It's not like we're going to leave anyone out. And unfortunately, the average police officer today is costing us, the average, basic is costing us $250,000 per officer for all the wraparounds and everything that we have. It doesn't make economic sense to us anymore. It just doesn't work. So I see that as like two separate parts of the puzzle, because where are we going to get the money? Well, we have to reinvest in our communities. So a lot of the money, we have to talk about reimagining policing, public safety. Our budgets have to be justice-based. They have to be around the needs of the people before the security state. So, that's where I'm seeing a lot of that. So where I would focus, as a housing justice organizer, is I would focus on filling those vacancies first, getting people off the streets today. And for future planning, when we're talking 10, 15, 20 years down the road for how we're going to build our society, to focus instead of on upzoning, on 100% affordable overlay zones, where we can create our own housing at the levels that we need to address the issues that have been raised, the very legitimate issues about economic and racial disparity. So I'll take questions.
If that was quite a mouthful.
And thank you for letting me rant.
No, that's what we're here for. Ranting, hollering, hooping and hollering, or even talking quietly. So a couple of things come to mind. Redlining and the inability of the purposeful, it was done on purpose to communities of color to not be able for them not to be able to get the financing that they would need to buy a home.
And even worse.
And just on that one level, the difference between somebody that was able to buy a home, a white person, versus somebody who wasn't and had to be a tenant their whole life, is the difference between generational wealth and not generational wealth.
Absolutely right.
And I think that is, if we're going to talk about restorative justice, I think that is something that we heavily have to correct, so that, when especially, maybe not in the, rich neighborhoods, but, in some of the poor neighborhoods in, like, south part of LA and things like that, where your average home is not $1 million plus. Developers want to go in there because they know they can gobble up those units for cheap, those houses for cheap. But every house that they gobble up is one less opportunity for a young Black person or a young brown person, or just starting a family, to buy a piece of property. And
these are the very people that they point to upzone.
Yeah, and what do you get when you own property? Well, you pay on it for a while, and after a while, as your kids grow up and they're ready to go to college, you can go get a loan against your house to send your kid to college. That's what the white people do. Or you can get a loan against your house and start a small business. That's what white people do.
Yeah, because you need money to make money.
You need money to make money, at least to have access to capital to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, if we're talking restorative justice, I think that is where we need to really kind of, nail it home. Is creating situations where
the results have to meet the rhetoric.
I mean, and that's why I'm for co-ops and land trusts and all of these kinds of things. Even reasonably priced condominiums. I have a friend who has a condominium up in Sunland, Tahunga, and she had her mom help her out, and she was able to get in there, and she loves it, and she's building something. She's building towards the future. When
we also have to understand that subsidized housing has to be a permanent part of the plan. It has to be a permanent line item in the budget.
Yes.
If I've been hearing a lot of talk, let's look at Vienna. Well, what Vienna did to fight the capitalists 100 years ago was they built social housing. And today, they have about 62% of the population receiving some sort of rent subsidy. And a lot of the buildings, they're mixed income buildings. So if you earn more, you pay more. If you earn less, you pay less. But no one's paying more than like 25% of their income. Mm-hmm. If you're at like the top level, maybe paying 30% to balance it off. But that creates housing for everyone.
Yeah.
And we need to start understanding that if we're going to be talking about all this new construction we have to do for all the housing that they're going to still try to push through, and my voice only goes so far, and the developers have a much longer reach than I do. So I know more market rate housing is going to be there. If we understand that's realistically a part of the future, then we have to understand that subsidized housing also has to be a part of the future, because we can't leave the people at the bottom end of the scale out. So we still need to provide housing for them. And if that means that we have to pay subsidies on some of this market rate that's being developed, then that's what we're going to have to do. But we don't leave people on the streets. And we should talk a little bit about RENA, because RENA is.
Oh, you are reading my mind.
Yeah, because right now in
430,000 units that we're responsible for over the next 8 years, and that's just for the city of Los Angeles. Yeah. And they don't give a crap whether it's market rate, low income. We have met our RENA numbers here in the city of Los Angeles. Our market rate numbers. We met that and went above that, but and like on the scale, right? On the graph, right?
Yeah.
It's like this much. We'll go over this. It's like this much for market rate that we're responsible for, and then it's like these little tiny things, for the different other income levels, right?
Yeah. In Culver City, it's kind of the same way.
And even at those
even
at those little tiny levels. Right, we're not meeting those goals. Market rate,
we're not
this big. The other one's this little, right? And
there's a lot of duplicity in this as well. There's a lot of duplicity because we don't need to upzone a thing to get all of our market rate units.
No, we don't.
We can build more than enough market rate housing without upzoning anything.
Do you follow?
And here in Culver City, we have lower levels, but it's like for a 5 square mile city, we have to build 3,300 new units. About 1,074 of those are market rate. Mm-hmm. I think those are already built, I believe. We have a handful of projects that covers it all.
Right.
But for the other 2,200 plus units that are at moderate, low, and very low income levels, that zero for extremely low and no income.
Mm-hmm.
But the homeless people are the ones they keep pointing to as the reason why we need to keep building more. But no units in RENA for them.
Right.
Okay. But those 2,200 units, they don't tell us how we're going to get those. And our city council went as far as to pass an ordinance, a resolution saying that they're going to meet their RENA goals. Well, now they've just made themselves legally responsible to meet those affordable goals as well. But they have no plan on how to do it. Because when they talk about RENA, they're like, put it all together. We just need 3,300 units. We don't care what type of units they are. Well, no, we have to care because the mandate is that we have so many markets, so many moderate, so many low, and so many very low units, and we have to meet those mandates, not just a global mandate that allows developers to go wild on the market. No. So we have to be responsible for our communities to build the type of housing. If we have to build, we build the type of housing that we need.
You know what the state brushed under the rug?
And we don't back down on that.
What the state brushed under the rug.
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the state brushed under the rug?
What?
That the RENA numbers are actually based on faulty data.
Yeah, that too.
That they're inflated. That they're inflated by about 25%.
Yeah, and also the proportion of how it's broken up was all based on the whims of Google and Amazon and Apple and Facebook and all these corporations that want to take over the West Side. Mm-hmm. And so even though we have 4 times as many units vacant than people who are homeless, and we're losing 130,000 people in California every year due to the price of being so extreme that people simply can't afford to live here, and we have all this market rate that's just sitting empty, they want us to believe that we still need to build more. And every time we build something more, guess what happens? Another multi-billion-dollar corporation says, well, we're going to move there too. And next thing you know, we have to build even more housing for even more millionaires. And it's a never-ending positive feedback loop where the more you build, the more millionaires are going to want to move in, or the more corporations are going to want to move in to make it completely exclusive. And then when there's no poor people, and then when there's no homeless people, and there's no black and brown people in the community, then they'll say, oh, we got enough.
Yeah.
And it's just not right. It's just not the vision that I want to see for my future.
Do you follow Dick Plotkin and City Watch?
Yeah, I follow him quite a bit, and he's calling it out.
No, he is.
He's going after the real numbers.
Folks listening to this, Google it. Dick Plotkin, Platkin, City Watch, and he puts out an article about once a week. And the one thing that had always stuck in my head about when we're talking about housing and homelessness is, and this whole idea of upzoning, is that we don't, in the city of Los Angeles, we don't need to upzone a single parcel, not a single parcel, to be able to grow, to produce enough structures to house an additional 3, 4, 5 million people without having to upzone. We already have the zoning capacity to already build that. But again, like you were saying, Mark, these people come in and they're like, oh, we got to upzone. Look, the homeless people, the only solution is upzone. We're going to build. And all they're doing is gentrification, which, as we know, is moving out what they consider the undesirables, which is basically our communities of color. To me, diversity is our strength. We have to have diversity in our society. Otherwise, it's not a society I want to be a part of. I just,
Exactly. And And when they come into all these areas, and it's not even gentrification anymore, it's the corporatization. Because before it was like, this white family here, that white family there, moving in, they got some money, they're moving in slowly, buying up this house. No, now it's a corporation coming in with 3,000 to 5,000 high-paid employees, saying we're moving to this already dense region where we're going to have to destroy the entire infrastructure and rebuild our own corporate community is what they're looking to do. They're already calling Culver City the hub. They're already calling it the mini Manhattan. Yeah, and all these corporations are looking at Culver City as the next cool place to be. It's the same thing that happened a decade ago to Venice when Google got an 80% tax break to move into Venice because they didn't want to pay their business tax in Santa Monica. So LA gave them an 80% tax break. They moved into Venice. They gave their employees bonuses to drive their bicycles to work so that they could promote their green image. And then all of a sudden, the rent wars started. Rent started tripling overnight. You started getting people thrown off the street left and right. You had these illegal Ellis Act evictions where they would just evict mostly seniors on fixed incomes,
and the disabled.
Then Venice, when I was working in Venice a decade ago, they were converting SRO and low-income housing into hotel rooms. We lost about 3,000, more than 3,000 low-income units in Venice because of Airbnb and hotel conversions. And then they're like, why are all these homeless people on the street? And the people who are being the loudest are the ones who just moved here, who just dropped a couple $1 million for their nice little McMansion. And then all of a sudden they get upset that they see homeless people blocking their view of the sunset and saying, well, we can't deal for all these homelessness. Let's just call the police. Let's just criminalize it all. And we've been through this already. We've been through this. Let's criminalize them. Let's give them shelters. Let's criminalize continuum of care. And it just keeps going back and forth. And neither one is the solution. It's just the Republicans or the right wing playing against the neoliberals. And that's the amount of conversation we can have when this is what we're able to do. We have all the housing we need right now for everyone who's homeless. So let's just get them in the housing that already exists, and not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but today. And that's kind of my hard line. It's just we have the housing, let's make use of it, and then let's look at what additional housing we need. Because I don't think we need all this housing, because every for rent sign plastered in every block we have going up and down streets, we're seeing for rent signs everywhere. I haven't seen so many for rent signs and so many for lease signs, so many small businesses going out of business now. And I know COVID had a lot to do with it, but that was just kind of like the final push over the cliff. It's not like we hadn't backed ourselves up there to begin with.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking about the federal judge that handed down that the moratoriums are actually, well, according to him, unconstitutional. And if it were to say go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court were not to strike down that judge's order, what would be the results? And the result could possibly be mass evictions. But I was, in my conversation with them, it kind of occurred to me that they would be, the landlords, particularly the big corporate landlords, would kind of be cutting their nose off to spite their face if they were to do something like that. Because as more and more units become available on the market, then economics 101, supply and demand will take over at that point, because now we're not talking about a speculative market. And for folks that don't know, why I believe that trickle down housing doesn't work is because we do have speculation in the market where people, the mega rich, are parking huge sums of money in our housing market. And that's one of the reasons we have so many vacant units, is because they buy these things not because they ever intend to rent them out. They buy these buildings not because they ever intend to rent them out, but as a place to park money. But if there were to be, a mass eviction, like a mass extinction, a mass eviction event, I think that they need to realize, or hope they come to realize, that if they were to do something like that, it would actually ruin their own market.
Mhm.
And
also you have to watch out for
forced.
too many disgruntled people who've just been made homeless.
Yeah,
Because we've got organizations. I mean, talk about the LA Tenants Union and all the great work that they've done over the last years. And now there's a UTAC. It's a unhoused tenants against carceral
yes,
housing or something like that. You have unhoused people starting to organize.
yep,
Beware of the rise of the unwashed.
yeah,
When people who have been oppressed for so long start raising their voices,
yeah.
then I'm sorry, the game is over. Because there are so many people. If you want to see 70,000 people, and then on top of it, all the people that they're looking to evict stand up at the same time, because that's what it's coming to. Because one of the things I'm hearing from the unhoused community is, where do you want us to go? They're trying to move us from one park to one place to one other. And where do you want us to go? There's no place to go. So unless you're going to provide the actual housing and keep us in our communities, we're not going anywhere. And people are, at one point or another, people are going to get so fed up that they're going to start organizing together and show their collective strength. And that's what's happening. So politicians, beware.
Mm-hmm. And these are the kinds of things that I am I've been informed of, and I don't consider myself I consider myself an activist first and a politician second. I started out as a trans activist, and then once I decided I was actually going to run for office, and getting involved with my neighborhood council, that's when I started to see how messed up things were in the city of Los Angeles. And we're just talking about housing and homelessness today, but there's a lot of other stuff out there that just ain't right. And so
but also something we haven't talked about today, getting into all of this with parking money in housing that just sits vacant, is there's a big push right now also for a vacancy tax.
I'm all on board with that. Everybody has my full support. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at, and as I get closer, but one of the things that I want to do is have lined up what I call first day motions. It's like, what are you going to do?
Work already?
What are you going to do on your first day in office? Right. That's the question they ask the president. It's like, what are you going to do on the first day? And so I'm contemplating about six or eight different motions, and some of them may get traction, some of them may not, but because you got to have a majority vote to get anything done, right? But I want to put stuff forward that I think a lot of times stuff doesn't get put forward in like Culver City and LA and some of these other cities probably, because I'm afraid to put that motion forward because it won't get a second or won't get any support or whatever. And to me, and one of the reasons I started conversations with LA is because we have to jumpstart these conversations. And when you're talking about sitting on a city council, the way you jumpstart conversations is that you introduce motions to committee.
And also there's that's a completely great path to go. So you have to be ready once you get in. I'm a poet. That's my first job. And as a poet, really
I
The
want to.
motivation of my work in my life is to tell the truth.
Yes.
And once you jump into the shark pool of having to compromise and having to make deals and all this stuff, the truth becomes kind of this gray area.
Right.
And so instead of compromising my positions, I decided to take a different route where not running for office, but running on policies to get policies pushed through. And basically, I decided to become a big fish in a small pond, where I find a way to get a seat at the table. Any seat, doesn't have to be an elected seat, just get a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And then start making introducing all of that progressive stuff, while also not being afraid of, oh, are they going to vote for me? Are they not going to vote for me? I don't care, because I'm not running for anything. So I can keep telling the truth. And one of the most important things I see as an advisor to my city council is that I have to give them honest advice.
Right.
And whether they like it or not, whether they agree with it or not, I still have a responsibility to tell them the truth and to show them better ways forward. And because I've got a very big mouth on me, I can make myself heard. And eventually, with enough persistence, people start coming around and asking the right questions, because it's not about providing people with answers. It's about getting people to ask the right questions, because then they find their own answers. Mm-hmm. And when you start questioning the status quo, when you start questioning how things have always been done, when you start questioning the upzoning plan and put out good questions,
right,
other people start asking those same questions. And then they start wanting to hear about other types of solutions. And that's actually where we are today in Culver City. And last Tuesday, 6 days ago, in our very last budget hearing, before that work plan gets solidified, and then that's what we're going to vote on, yes or no.
Right.
After years of pushing for that scattered site, that direct housing, home housing first program, to an empty room. I just went there and gave it one last go. And finally, our Vice Mayor, Daniel Lee, gave direction to staff to start researching a direct housing program. Nice. So we finally, after years, we've gotten to the starting line. Yeah. And that's a very important place to go, because now all of a sudden we're having that conversation, or we're pushing so that conversation can no longer be ignored.
Right.
And so I see a lot of positive things on the horizon, but it's, any organizer is going to tell you, pick an issue that you care about and become the expert. And that's what you have to do. Whether it's housing, whether it's the environment, whether it's anti-war, whether it's justice for this, justice for that, become the expert. Know the issue better than anyone else, then you become the person they go to for wanting questions and answers. That's how you build your own respect within the community, and you stick to it. Regardless of the shifting winds, you focus on the solutions of how to do it right, and people will come around. Right now, there's so much desire for something better that regionally, I got people from Mar Vista and Venice coming to me, asking me, well, what do you think about housing? Should we try this? Should we try that? And all of a sudden, people are starting to question how we can do things better. Mm-hmm. And that's when the momentum, the movement starts growing legs, where it's not about a one person putting anything out. I don't want to be the leader of anything. Mm-hmm. I want to empower as many people as possible to think outside the status quo. Yes, because that's how we're going to win.
Yeah. No, I agree. And empower. I like to use the word inspire. Yeah. People to use the power that they have.
Yeah. Something that I don't want to forget before we move on, is because the unique situation on the entire West Side with all these multinational corporations moving in. Something else I just want to put a plug in for this is that we need to tax these guys. Major corporations tax. We need to up the tax on these billionaires and now trillionaires moving into our communities to get them to pay for the damage that they're doing to our internal infrastructure. They can't just move here saying we're going to move 5,000, 10,000 new employees here and not be funding the housing that they need for those employees. They can't do that to communities anymore, and they can't be making our infrastructure so overburdened that it's all on the average lower income taxpayer through sales taxes and stuff like that. No, these major corporations have to start paying their fair share. So I wanted to make sure that got in as well.
Would not the counter argument from the establishment be, well, if we do that, then they won't come here, and we want them to come here because it increases the tax base?
Good. Bye.
I say the same thing about housing, developers, what I call predatory developers. Because it's a similar argument. It's like, well, if we make it too difficult for them to build, or if we ask for too many low-income units in a development, then they're not going to want to build.
And we need to decommodify housing.
Like what you said, it's like, good. So, if they don't,
and you know what that means?
Figure it out. It's like anybody walking into my door.
And we can get that property and make it lower income. We can build community land trusts, and the value of the land that's so sky high that only an investment speculator can afford to buy, it starts to become affordable for our community so that we can buy our own properties. And you know what? As far as these big corporations wanting to leave, they picked our neighborhoods. This is where they want to be. They want the cool place at the beach. We made it cool. We made Venice cool. We made Santa Monica cool. We made Culver City cool. We made Mar Vista cool. And now all the people who made it cool, they want to evict. And then they're going to have the vanilla styrofoam thinking, oh, well, this is so cool because we can put up a paparazzi umbrella or something. No, you lose the whole idea of community, diversity, art, and culture. When you kick the low-income people out and the people of color out, you lose all that.
Yeah. And it's the same similar situation with communities like Echo Park, Westlake, and then some of the communities down south as well. These people spent years defending their neighborhoods against gangs. Right? And
you mean criminalizing Black and brown communities?
What I'm saying is that there were drive-by shootings and things like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was a criminal.
All that stuff's real. What was the root of it? What created that? Well, maybe the government should have been funneling drugs into our neighborhoods, defunding our communities, and all that stuff from the beginning.
What I'm trying to say is that the folks that live there, and these are people of color as well, that they defended their communities and built up their communities and tried to bring peace into their communities. Mm-hmm. And to some extent they were successful, but then you have predatory developers coming in and gentrifying out, and it's like the LA River Master Plan. The LA River Master Plan, who is that for? It's not for the folks that live along the river in Atwater Village and Elysian Valley and Glassell Park. It's not at Frogtown, because those areas are majority Latina, right? Mm-hmm. It's not for them, because
what's happening to Boyle Heights?
Yeah, exactly. And you come in and you put in this beautiful looking parks. I've seen all the drawings. They're absolutely beautiful. Excuse me.
But it's not for the people who live there.
But it's not for the people who live there.
It's not for the people who live there, it's for the people they want to import.
And that's what ticks me off. Because and that's what I haven't been able to wrap my head around, because every time we try to, we'd like to, I mean, I'd love to see the LA River Master Plan done. Would love to. Yeah. But I'd like to see the community that's already there being able to enjoy the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. Because whenever we have a major development project, it's the poor people who wind up getting excluded.
Yeah. They end up getting the boot, you know, out of their own neighborhoods. And
look at what's happening to Leimert Park right now. They've approved the green line, so that's greenlining. That's greenlining the development. And I'm glad I mentioned that, because it's taken us 100 years to be able to speak about redlining.
Right.
Is it going to take us 100 more to talk about greenlining, about how only the wealthy are allowed to live in these communities? We have to be speaking up about this loud and often to make sure that we pressure those who have those precious votes over how land use and all that's going to happen, make sure that they hear our voices. Because, from what I hear from our communities, we're not going to be evicted anymore. We're not going to be displaced anymore. And, we have to be organizing collectively together, and hopefully our individual little communities can form some type of union together because the worst thing about organizing is when you feel like you're alone.
Yes.
When you feel like you're by yourself and no one's hearing you. The greatest experience I had as an organizer was when we took the lawn at LA City Hall for Occupy LA. Because all of a sudden, we had thousands of people from the entire region coming together saying, gee, I thought I was alone too, but now, look at how powerful we are. Look at how many people actually care about what's going on and think differently than what's being told to us on the television.
Right.
And that's the moment for me when our organizing, took a step up. We graduated to a new level at that moment, because even though they evicted us from the camp, those networks are still alive and active today. The people that I met a decade ago on City Hall lawn are the same people who are doing the work for the public bank, who are doing the work for our housing justice, who are doing the work for environmental justice and economic justice and racial justice. So all of this, it's the same people. But now it's like it's the same people plus more, because we've been able to expand our networks. Now we need to bring that together so that all of these bureaucrats and politicians understand that we're a cohesive force that they can't just push around anymore.
I wonder if a good idea would be, just spitballing, would be to maybe have a Congress, some sort of, to bring all of those folks kind of back together for, maybe a weekend of conversations or something like that.
Yeah, I love the social justice forums and stuff like that, like a weekend symposiums, that kind of stuff. With the virtual world now, it becomes, I guess, we want to be out more together, but it's so easy to connect online now that I don't know how those symposiums are going to work, because now we're able to actually participate in national and international levels as well.
Yeah.
So the pandemic has allowed us to actually expand. It's just getting as much done without burning out.
I do know.
You know what I mean? It's just like I'm putting like 60 hours a week just on housing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all volunteer. And it's because, we're this close, and all we need is a little bit more, and I can see the community starting to come together. I don't know what the solution is for that larger network, but I'm hoping that we can actually, and this right here, this helps us connect in our region. Just more events like this, getting people either face to face or Zoom to Zoom or however that's going to work, screen to screen, to recognize our own existence. Because we didn't even know each other a couple hours ago. Yeah, we just on a quick email, but we start to know each other. And then we start to know who's doing work in their community. And this is all about that movement building that we talk about, because I know that you're going to go out and you're going to be talking to friends in your circles about the conversation that we're having today and some things that you heard, and I'm going to be doing the same thing. And that's how we build that cohesiveness.
Exactly.
So
that's why it's, to me, why I set up conversations with LA, and how I will conduct myself while I'm running for office and once in office. It's all about the conversations, and particularly the difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
People get,
if it's an easy conversation, then you're just talking to the choir.
Exactly. But that seems to be, with most politicians, and I am not most politicians. Most politicians, they don't want to have the difficult conversations, because then they have to actually take a stand on something.
Actually, I picked up a quote from your website, and I'll just share it just to get it online here, is that leaders who do not act dialogically, but insist on imposing their decisions, do not organize the people, they manipulate them. They do not liberate, nor are they liberated. They oppress. Paulo Freire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I actually saw that on your website, so I picked that for myself. I'm actually I have a new book coming out. Ding self promotion. Yeah.
Go ahead, self promote. Yes. Go ahead.
It's called Dear City Council.
Dear City Council.
And it's basically public comments, essays, and selected poems over the last 3 years. Specifically focusing on what's happening in Culver City. So it's telling the story of Culver City through the perspective of the podium.
When's that come out?
August 1st, it's out nationally. I'm going to try to make it about a month earlier for local release.
Okay.
But that's one of the things that I'm actually working on right now. It's about to be sent to the printer. We're on the final proofs right now. Let me read you a poem from
this.
Please.
Yes, please.
Oh, yes. Okay. So
that'll be awesome.
It's called In Times of War and Homelessness.
Okay.
In times of war and homelessness, truth is always the first victim. As the casualties pile up in our collective consciousness, memory has the lifespan of a goldfish, forgetting itself with each subsequent news cycle. Spun around half lies and whole falsehoods, the politician is never too far away to pat himself on the back, taking credit for what he has never done, or at best was forced to do. Selling cheap words and platitudes to the suffering masses who must make do with unkept promises and a shrinking waistline, while stretching bread lines lick an empty shelf. Compassion dies behind tall walls that separate the eyes from the heart, as those with more shorten the table to stuff their faces with the blood of the poor. For hunger is a crime in times of war and homelessness, and the refugee must take the blame for the shock and awe. For only the guilty would place their children beneath our bombs bursting in air and the rocket's red glare that is there to entertain us, to distract us from our own humanity, for having the audacity, to wash up upon our shores like some dead fish with the tides. For in times of war and homelessness, with God on our side and the proper application of collective punishment, we may be blessed to even forget that they ever existed at all. Excuse me, I had a little catch in my throat while I was reading that, though.
The throat gets dry, gets a little scratchy. I get it. No, I'm a little bit of a poet myself. And that was good. Wow.
Thank you.
That gives you a bit to think about.
But a poet.
But folks, anybody tuning in right now or sees this in the future, You just heard a reading from Mark's new book, straight from the author. So I don't know if you've done that before, whether or not this is a scoop or not. Um,
It's the first time I actually read that poem.
okay, there you go. I'll take that one. And so, yeah, I guess we've, it's funny. I think this is like the seventh or eighth one of these that I've done. And I have yet to do one of these that didn't last upwards of an hour and a half. Uh, the interview that I did with Mel from Showers of Hope, I think that
Fantastic
was,
guy.
yeah, I think that was like 2 hours and 15 or 20 minutes that we talked. And that was before I went to video live stream format. That was a pre-recorded podcast, which you can find on conversationswithla.com. Everybody, yeah, Mel is fantastic. We had an awesome talk. Um, so
I'm in awe of the work that he's been doing with Shower of Hope.
yeah,
I mean, it's like fantastic.
yeah,
He's truly bringing hope to thousands of people.
yeah, literally,
Yeah, literally.
and now he has branched out into um, providing housing for students from LACC.
That's fantastic.
And
Yeah, much respect to you, Mel.
yeah,
Yeah,
big time respect.
yeah.
So, any final thoughts? I guess maybe now's a good time to wrap up. But any final thoughts you want to tell the folks, or me, or the universe?
Well, I think I've had a full breath today, so thank you for inviting me here. For anyone who cares about what's going on, just get involved. Your voice is important. It's more important now than ever. We're winning, but we are far from one. And the developers and the status quo can just take over as easy as anything again, and we're the ones that suffer in the end. So we really have to, make the solutions work and push them. It's up to us.
Yeah, and I realize that a lot of us, are probably suffering from some trauma from having to push so hard over the last 4 years because of who, and yeah, you do the self care, but don't give up on the fight. And I think that's I'm hearing little whispers here and there that a lot of people are just kind of burn out on politics and things like that, and that's understandable, but do some self-care, but don't get out of the game. And for those who have never been in the game before, we need you. We need you now, like Mark says, probably more than ever, because we are kind of on the precipice of actually getting some things done. But we do need that extra help and that extra push and that extra support.
I'll tell you something just to close out. When I did my very first canvas job back in '92 for CalPERG, it was going door to door, talking to people about protecting our waterways and all this, and collecting money. And I couldn't stand collecting the money part of it. I love talking about the issues, but I can't stand making the ask. And after about a month and a half on the job, I went to my supervisor and said, "Look, this just ain't for me." And he looks at me and says, "Well, that's okay, because once you open your eyes, you can never close them again." And that's the truth. Because eventually, once you open your eyes and you start asking those questions, you're not going to stop. You can't help yourself. So take what you can, find the starting point and go from there. There's no real right or wrong way to do anything. Follow the truth that's inside you and step up. We need everyone to step up these days.
Yep, absolutely. Well, with that, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. live, and thank you to anybody
Thank
that
you,
will
Rachel.
watch this in the future. It was an awesome conversation. Um, keep the faith, and I look forward to. Oh, Mark, what is your website? Give people your website. I know you talked about the book, but
Oh, sure. Vagabondbooks.net. Hold on a second. I'll put it up on the screen for you. This is actually another one of my books. You can find it on the website, and I'll put it right up there for you.
Vagabond. Oh, there it is.
So vagabondbooks.net.
Vagabondbooks.net. All right. So that's where you can.
Yeah, check it out. We've got a lot of great stuff up on the website.
Yeah. And don't forget to hit both me and Mark up on social media. We are out there. We're not hiding. We are speaking out. You know, join us in combining our voices so that we can make some good change, cause some good trouble. All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel, so much for having me here.
And we'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you again.
Bye bye. Have a good afternoon.